Hey kiddies, it's Triple Feature Tuesday once again, and we're going to look at some American adaptations of British comic book characters.
I'm afraid of Americans. I'm afraid of them.
See, there's a long tradition of the gentleman British supernatural investigator and or detective who goes around and helps the innocent and takes down the spooky monsters with wit, cleverness, and a very well-versed knowledge of history and folklore. So, for our American comic book movie adaptations, we made them all American and gave them shotguns. It's like you can imagine it, like English characters, like when they come over on the their Ellis Island experiences, like their comic book passport is stamped and then they're handed a shotgun and told to ignore their accent. I'm not kidding. This has happened at least 3 times where they're not, the characters are not always created by British people, but they are distinct. They are originally distinctly British, and the comic book appearances never really had guns or anything like that. And each time, regardless of whether or not it fits the milieu of the character, the American adaptation has given them a gigantic shotgun. And they use it, and it's awesome, because American action movies are awesome. They're just so much fun. So, our menu is going to include Blade, Constantine, and Dylan Dog Dead of Night. Blade. The first successful Marvel big screen film adaptation. And, fun fact, the main character is black. Now, here's the thing. Black Panther is legitimately one of the greatest comic book adaptations ever put on film. However, I get annoyed when it's referred to as not only the first successful black superhero movie, but the first successful black Marvel movie, which this was the one that set everything else up. Prior to Blade, the only 2 Marvel big screen adaptations were Howard the Duck and the Dolph Lundgren Punisher movie. And then nothing happened for 10 years. And then Stephen Norrington and Wesley Snipes gave us Blade. And here's the thing. Okay, you can make the argument that Black Panther was the first Marvel Studios big screen movie to focus on a black protagonist. But that doesn't even work that well either, because if you look at that original Blade movie, that is the Marvel Studios method. Right there, right out of the gate. You strip the character down to the essentials, the core. What makes this character not only great, but also a Marvel character. You update everything else that needs to be updated, and then you give it a good script and release. And that was Blade. And not for nothing, Spawn, which came out a year before Blade, doubled its money. So, but the Wesley Snipes Blade movie. Oh my lord. Everything about this movie is genius. So Blade, Eric Brooks, originally appeared in Tomb of Dracula. And this is him here. Look at how badass and amazing he is in his green jacket and his sunglasses. Now, you notice they kept the sunglasses, they just updated it. They also gave him a better coat, and they also gave him a shotgun. Originally, Blade didn't even have the sword, he only had these teak throwing knives, and that was how he got the name Blade. And in the first couple issues, they don't really reference him being a half-vampire right away. They do talk about how his mother was attacked by a vampire while he was in the womb, but they don't really get into all the superpowers and everything that comes along with being half-vampire until later. So we kept badass black guy, sunglasses, angry at vampires, and then we gave it to Wesley Snipes, who at that point was still one of the biggest action stars of the time, and man, just great martial artist and a good stage fighter in film. And we chalked away everything else, and so he is no longer British, which honestly, in the comics, it's kind of iffy whether or how British he's supposed to be in those early issues. He's definitely British later. They established that fact. But he didn't have any shotguns or goofy James Bondy weapons to fight all of the vampires. But we love James Bondy weapons, and we love shotguns in America. So they actually came up with a way. Like usually in vampire movies, the way you get around the stake through the heart, but we love guns thing is, everybody is using a crossbow all the time. Nope. He actually has a shotgun that fires these gigantic silver stakes right through vampires that have, varying effects from immolating the vampire to just holding the vampire in place. I guess they. No, I was gonna say I guess it matters whether or not it actually gets him in the heart, but they don't do that. They actually specifically say silver makes them go into anaphylactic shock and then they explode. It doesn't matter. What matters is that Blade is brilliant because, yes, they changed a lot about the core of the character to make him American, but they kept what mattered. Scary, gory vampires, scary, gory vampire deaths, blood everywhere, moodiness, creepiness. They made the movie work with what it was supposed to be. One of the things I love about all three of these movies is they all have the same exact scene where the main character is talking to the newly introduced to this world female character and explaining how you only think you know what the world is. There's a secret world where all the real stuff happens. And each time they give this speech, it feels more and more patronizing and condescending. And Blade here features the best version of this speech. This is your world, the world you know is a sugar-coated topping to the real world, which, it just, like, every time I eat ice cream now, I think, once I eat through the sprinkles, is it all just vampires am I eating the ice cream or is it eating me? It's a weird metaphor, and I love it because Blade. And, it's so good of a movie, a lot of people don't even know it is a Marvel movie because Blade wasn't that interesting a character in the comics until Wesley Snipes started playing him, and then everything after that is Blade, which, again, I cannot stress enough, the Blade movie is the Marvel method beforehand because it became so popular that the comic book changed after that. And if you don't believe me, try finding any interesting Iron Man comic books before Robert Downey Jr. and Jon Favreau started working on the character. I dare you. Next up, we have much more of a departure from the source material. We have the Francis Lawrence, Keanu Reeves film, Constantine. Now, Constantine first appeared in the Saga of the Swamp Thing, created by Alan Moore and Stephen Bissette. Alan Moore, when he took over Swamp Thing, asked Stephen Bissette, is there anything specifically you would like to draw? And Stephen Bissette knew exactly. I want to draw a character that looks like Sting from The Police, because this was the 80s. And so, Alan Moore created John Constantine, the self-described nasty piece of work that you see right there, who does in fact look like Sting, and is British, and has blonde hair. So obviously when we're making a live-action adaptation of him, you would get Keanu Reeves with his normal dark hair, and we would change the whole outfit to be all black, because he's still wearing the jacket and, the tie and everything, and he's smoking, so there's that. I mean, it could have been worse. At one point, Nicolas Cage was in talks to play John Constantine, and by worse, I mean amazing. So, we take away the British thing. He is now American, based in L.A., and he lives above a bowling alley. Now, this is going to be a controversial statement, but not only do I think the Constantine movie great, but I also think that the Keanu Reeves performance of Constantine is the most in-keeping performance to date of any non-comic book version of John Constantine, and here's why. It's not that Matt Ryan doesn't do a fine job with Constantine on the Constantine show and The Legends of Tomorrow. He definitely looks the part. The voice works. I think it would be better served if he wasn't trying to do a Liverpudlian accent and would just talk with his regular English accent, because it comes out kind of weird and muddled. It's sort of like when George Lazenby was James Bond, and it's just like, if this is as good an English accent you're going to do, you may as well just you just speak with your natural Australian. But I digress. The thing that I don't like about the CW version of Constantine is that he's too nice. He is portrayed as a reluctant hero, and that is not the core of the character. So yes, in the Keanu Reeves movie, he's American. He does not look like Constantine, but he is a dick to every single character that he interacts with. Like, look at that opening scene where he gets introduced. He shows up in the taxi, driven by Chaz, so Chaz and a taxi, even though now it's Shia LaBeouf and he's like an American kid. But he's a dick to Chaz. He's a dick to Pruitt Taylor Vince, his friend, who will, of course, be murdered later, because if you're a friend of John Constantine, you're gonna die, because John Constantine is affectionately described as a rake at the gates of hell. He's a dick to Pruitt Taylor Vince. He's a dick to the parents of the kid that's being possessed. He's a dick to the kid. He's a dick to the demon. He's a dick to all the people that come and try to help out. And then he's a dick to everybody else, all of these people on the way out in all this 10-minute sequence. And this continues throughout the whole movie. He is never helping anybody in this movie unless there is an angle for him. And his whole angle is trying to get out of hell. Like, especially Rachel Weisz's character. He's never actually really helping her to help her. He just, thinks this might be another way to get out of hell. And he is going to hell because he tried to commit, he successfully committed suicide, but then got revived. And so now he is doomed forever to go to hell because Catholics. He gets to have the "your world is not the real world" speech while eating pancakes. That's I like that we're continuing the sugar and the sweets metaphor while explaining there's the world and the real world. Of course, in trying to save the day and eventually help Rachel not go to hell or the son of Satan coming and destroying the whole world, John Constantine, of course, needs a shotgun. A gigantic golden shotgun, which is in the shape of a cross, and I believe is from the same arms manufacturer as the Holy Hand Grenade of Antioch. Don't get me wrong, the movie takes a lot of license with just about every other character, even though most of the characters do appear from the comic book. Like, Papa Midnight was only a reluctant ally once, and that was just for a very specific set of circumstances, and then was actively trying to kill John Constantine most of the time. Tilda Swinton as Gabriel is a brilliant, incredible performance, but Gabriel is very much a masculine character throughout the comic books. But we get the important things, like John dying of cancer and getting out of it through help from the devil himself, and then flipping the devil the bird at some point. So, it's silly, and no, it is not the ideal adaptation of John Constantine, but it's a lot of fun. And it's one, it's just a good supernatural action movie, and two, Keanu gets it. I kind of appreciated that Keanu got this jerk character and played him as big a jerk as he could throughout the entire film. And finally, we have Dylan Dog Dead of Night, starring Brandon Routh, which, guys, this movie is not that great. And I don't know how you should structure the triple feature if you end up doing it, because I don't like ending on a low note. But the movie is not equal to the comic book, which is an Italian comic book, Dylan Dog, or actually I think it was called Dead of Night. And but the main character is Dylan. The comic book is by Tiziano Sclavi, and it's run for 30 or 40 years. It's a very long-running comic book, but it's very spooky and black and white and a lot of fun. Writer-artist is Italian. The character was always supposed to be British, and what was neat is that the model for Dylan that Sclavi used was Rupert Everett. And at one point, Dylan goes to Italy and meets his Italian doppelganger, Francesco Della Morte, who runs who is the caretaker at the Buffalo Cemetery. And this was the character that was the basis of Cemetery Man, or Della Morte Della More, starring Rupert Everett. So Rupert Everett is the English actor who is the basis for the Italian character, and also played the Italian character in the play. So Rupert Everett was the model for the English character created by an Italian, and when they made an Italian movie of the Italian character that the English character once met, they got the actual English actor to play him. This is actually a very roundabout way to talk about Della Morte Della More, which is one of my favorite movies ever made, and you should actually just go watch that instead of Dylan Dog Dead of Night. But since we're here, starring Brandon Routh, who is pretty good in this. He finds a few moments to be kind of awkward and weird, which is in keeping with the character. But I feel like this movie could have been better if you had a just more naturally quirky actor as the lead role. But if you're looking for an American Rupert Everett, Brandon Routh is not the worst person to pick for that. And he, again, I'm a fan of Brandon Routh. He has only just grown more interesting every time I see him on the television and like the CW shows and everything like that. And Dylan Dog. What's fun is he is teamed up with Sam Huntington as a newly zombied guy, and Sam Huntington played Jimmy Olsen in Superman Returns, which had Brandon Routh as Superman. So it was kind of fun that this is like another comic book adaptation where it's like a hero and sidekick, and God help us if they make another one together, and then that will be its own triple feature of not great comic book adaptations starring these two guys, which are a lot more fun. Like Sam Huntington keeps finding random jokes and funny moments playing his zombie sidekick throughout the whole thing. In this one, Dylan is a private eye in New Orleans who is reluctantly dragged back into supernatural cases. We have like a big complicated backstory where he used to be a neutral enforcer of the law of all these supernatural beings and everything. It's really complicated and involved and not really well fleshed out or important. But we do get him in the outfit, and eventually, even though the character only ever had, a Webley revolver and a clarinet to defend himself in the comic books, we now have a shotgun. We actually have like a whole sequence where like, there's no plan, just guns, lots of guns, and it's... this movie's not good. It highlights, again, Brandon Routh and Sam Huntington. Taye Diggs is amazing as a vampire, so, it's kind of like fun. You can bookend the triple feature with two really interesting black vampire characters for the triple feature. But Dylan Dog, the movie just doesn't... I wish... you watch it and you wish it was a better movie than it turns out to be. We just have a generic conversation with the female lead where it's just like, oh no, there's the world and then there's another world with vampires and everything. But it's a lot more Men in Black-y than the Constantine or Blade. Like Blade and Constantine, they give it like a much bigger gravitas where it's like a big, scary like mystery and everything. And it's like, no, everybody's just a workaday guy. And if they played up more of the Men in Black-y type of stuff is fun, like when we find out what a zombie's daily care routine involves. It's pretty gross and hilarious. But it all ends up in a big, giant monster fight, because by then the Avengers movies were happening. And honestly, the big monster looks like a reject from the House of the Dead video games, so it just didn't work. Because like Blade, the comics, it was always an action comic book, and so they kept it in action. Constantine, no, it doesn't work as an adaptation in terms of Constantine the comic book was never an action comic book, but it's Keanu Reeves, and we're going to look at it as like a little Elseworlds where he's a superhero. Even though it's not a good adaptation, it's a good movie. Dylan, it's not a good adaptation, and it's not a good movie, but it is the third one where we took a very English character and made him American and gave him a shotgun. But it's still a fun triple feature to do, and so you should do that, and I'll see you guys next week.